I used to tell myself that envy was an emotion for people who didn't work hard enough. I believed that if you stayed focused, stayed grateful, stayed humble, you would eventually be seen, if not celebrated, by the people who mattered. But the day my parents gifted my younger brother, Ethan, a $950 home, something inside me shifted in a way I could never fully undo. I still remember the sunlight bouncing off the cream-colored brick as everyone gathered in the driveway. The house looked like something out of a magazine, tall windows, polished wood door, a yard big enough for the future children my mother liked to fantasize about. They decorated with ribbons and balloons, as if it were a wedding. But the moment that truly carved itself into my memory was when my mother wrapped her arms around Ethan and whispered, "This is the beginning of your life, sweetheart. You deserve it, deserve it." That word echoed in my head like a taunt. I stood in the background, smiling, clapping, helping carry in boxes, doing everything a good sibling was supposed to do. No one asked if I was okay. No one asked if I wanted help buying my first home someday. No one even noticed the quiet pain forming behind my polite expressions. But that was the dynamic of our family. Ethan was fire, bright, loud, impossible to ignore. I was water. Steady, necessary, but easily overlooked. 3 years passed before I finally scraped together enough money to buy my own place. It wasn't grand, not even close. A small 2-bedroom house with creaky floors and mismatched cabinets, but it felt like an accomplishment carved from my own sweat. I didn't get a grand celebration or balloons. My mother sent a short text, "Good. Now you won't have to rent anymore." No punctuation. No pride. I told myself it was fine. I'd learned to swallow disappointment like medicine, bitter but necessary. But everything changed the morning my parents arrived at my door without warning. My father wore that forced smile he used when delivering uncomfortable news. My mother walked in before I even invited her, her eyes scanning every corner of my small living room. "It's cozy," she said in a tone that made it sound like an insult. I ignored it. "What's going on?" My father cleared his throat. "We came because we need your help." I didn't understand until my mother clasped her hands dramatically and said, "It's about Ethan. He's going through something terrible, and we need you to do the right thing." I felt the old imbalance creep into the air again, a familiar heaviness. Whatever they were about to ask, I already knew it wouldn't be small. And it wouldn't be fair. The moment my mother said, "It's about Ethan," a pressure tightened in my chest. Every major decision in our family somehow circled back to him, the sun around which we were all expected to orbit. I gestured for them to sit, though they stood stiffly, as if sitting would weaken their authority. My father sighed heavily. "Your brother is struggling with the house." I blinked. "What do you mean, struggling? You paid for it. He still has responsibilities." My mother snapped. "Taxes, upkeep, repairs, you know how hard it is for him. Hard for him, hard for the man who had never paid a single bill until he was gifted a nearly $1 million home." I swallowed the bitter thoughts, but couldn't hide the confusion on my face. "Okay," I said slowly. "And what does that have to do with me?" My parents exchanged a look the kind couples share, before saying something they know won't land softly. "We need your house," my father said bluntly. For a moment, I actually laughed because I thought he was joking. But their expressions didn't change. My mother stepped forward and spoke with a rehearsed softness. "Just temporarily. Ethan needs a place to stay while he sorts everything out. Once he stabilizes, you can have it back." It took a moment for the words to register. "You want me to give him my house, the one I worked years to afford?" My mother's tone hardened. "We're not asking you to give it. Just sign it over to us for a little while. You can stay with us." Stay with them. As if I were a child again, as if the independence I fought for was disposable. "No," I said, more firmly than I expected. They both froze. My father's voice sharpened. "This is your brother. Family helps each other. Family helps equally," I replied. "Not just one person." My mother rolled her eyes. "Oh, don't start with that jealousy nonsense. Ethan has real problems. You're single, you have no kids, you'll be fine." It was the dismissal, the casual erasing of my own life, that stung the most. I shook my head. "I'm not signing anything." Their disappointment turned quickly into anger. "So that's it," my father said coldly. You're going to watch your brother drown. It's not my responsibility to save him, I whispered. My mother's eyes filled with a performative sorrow, the kind she used when she wanted to manipulate rather than mourn. We raised you better than this, she said. You owe us. Oh, they loved that word. But in that moment, standing in the tiny living room I had fought so hard for, something became crystal clear. I didn't owe them my life, my sacrifices, or the only home I had ever earned. They left with harsh words and hollow threats, slamming the door behind them. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't about helping Ethan. It was about control, about favoritism, about expecting me to stay small so he could stay comfortable. But I had finally learned how to say the word they hated most. The days that followed were a blur of ringing phones, unread messages, and the unsettling feeling that a storm was gathering above me. I ignored the first few calls from my parents, thinking they needed time to cool off. But when my brother's name flashed across my screen, I made the mistake of answering. You're unbelievable, Ethan snapped before I even said hello. Mom and Dad told me everything. You're seriously refusing to help your own brother. I closed my eyes. I'm not giving up my house, Ethan. I worked for it. He scoffed loudly. Oh, please, you act like you built the thing with your bare hands. It's just a starter home, and you're alone. Why do you even need that much space? The cruelty in his tone stung sharper than I expected. Because it's mine, I said softly. Well, now your selfishness is costing all of us. He snapped. But you don't care, do you? You've always been like this, quiet, bitter, jealous. He hung up before I could reply. The words sat heavy in my chest. Jealous, bitter, selfish, labels I had spent my whole life avoiding, now thrown at me because I refused to sacrifice myself for his comfort. Then came the extended family. My aunt texted, Your parents are heartbroken. Do the right thing. My uncle called to lecture me about family duty. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years sent paragraphs about loyalty, sacrifice, and how a house is just a house. Easy words to say when you weren't the one being asked to hand over everything. The worst was the message from my mother. If something happens to your brother because of you, remember that you chose this. It was manipulative, unfair, and deeply cruel. But it also made me suspicious. Why were they this desperate? Why were they acting like the world would collapse if Ethan didn't move into my modest little home? So I did what they never expected. I started asking questions. I reached out to an old friend who had connections in real estate. I asked him casually if he knew anything about the house my brother lived in. The answer chilled me. Ethan hadn't just been struggling with taxes. He had taken out a second mortgage on the $950,000 home my parents gifted him. Something they absolutely knew about. He had burned through money recklessly, gambling, partying, drowning himself in debt. And now the bank was circling. My parents weren't trying to save Ethan's stability or mental health. They were trying to save the only thing they valued more than fairness, their investment. They wanted my house, so the bank couldn't take his. The truth hit me so hard I had to sit down. I wasn't the problem. I wasn't the villain. I wasn't selfish. I was the backup plan. And that realization, cold, sharp, and undeniable, was the breaking point. When the truth settled into my bones, it didn't bring rage the way I expected. It brought clarity, a steady, icy sort of calm that made everything sharper. My family hadn't wanted my help. They wanted my compliance. They didn't care how it affected me as long as Ethan stayed shielded from the consequences of his own recklessness. And that was the moment I decided I wouldn't play my old role anymore. I didn't call them. I didn't confront them. I didn't expose what I'd learned. I simply stepped back. The silence confused them at first. My mother left voicemail after voicemail, her tone shifting from annoyed to pleading. My father sent short messages, first demanding, then frustrated, then strangely polite. Ethan tried calling too, but I let every attempt fade into the background. Their power had always come from my willingness to engage. Without that, the first cracks in their plan appeared. 3 weeks passed before the storm finally broke. A formal letter arrived addressed to my parents from the bank. It must have been delivered to the wrong place by accident. Slipped into my mailbox because the mail carrier recognized our family name. I hadn't been meant to see it, but I did. Foreclosure notice. My stomach tightened. Everything I'd suspected was true. Ethan's house, the $950,000 shrine of favoritism, was collapsing under the weight of his second mortgage and unpaid debts. The bank was preparing to seize the property. There was nothing left for my parents to maneuver, no time to hide the truth. They had counted on using my home as a shield, a temporary place for Ethan, while they scrambled to convince the bank he would recover. They thought they could pressure, guilt, or shame me into saving him, but I had done nothing, and that was exactly what broke their strategy. 2 days later, my mother showed up at my door. She didn't knock politely. She pounded as if she could force the door open through sheer authority. When I finally opened it, her face was red and streaked with tears. "How could you do this?" she cried. I didn't answer. I didn't invite her inside. "You knew the house was at risk," she yelled. "You could have stopped this. You could have helped your family." "My house is not a safety net for his mistakes," I said quietly. Her expression twisted. "You're heartless." "I'm finally protecting myself," I replied. For a moment, she had no words, and in that silence, she realized she had lost control over me. The foreclosure went through 3 weeks later. Ethan moved into a small apartment. My parents withdrew from the family gatherings for a while, humiliated. As for me, I sat on my porch, the one they once tried to claim, watching the sky turn soft shades of gold. My revenge wasn't loud, it wasn't cruel, it wasn't dramatic. It was simply the refusal to sacrifice myself again. Sometimes the sweetest revenge in the world is finally choosing you.